What's happening, guys? This is Logan Robinson from BucsGameday.com. I'm here with my guy, our editor-in-chief over there, River Wells at BG, and we are here with a good amount of stuff to talk about this week. We're going to talk about the rumors, the chatter, everything about Bill Belichick and the Bucs, something that was talked about a little while ago, now is being brought back up. So we are going to jump all into what Mike Florio talked about most recently on Barstool Sports Pardon My Take podcast. Interested to get Rivers' take on this as well, along with the chat. Put it down in the comments what you think about this whole whatever it is, honestly. But we'll be discussing that. We're also going to talk about Rondé Barber and him putting out his top 3 Buccaneers rookies going into the season. One of them, and we put it out on BucsGameday.com, one of them being a surprise. Number one is definitely one that we probably weren't expecting. So interested to get your take on that too, River, on those top 3 that he selected going into this 2025 season. And then we're going to jump into as well Mike Evans, and he spoke with our good friend Greg Allman, who was on last week's show. He picked his top young wide receivers in the league, and we'll talk a little bit about that also too. We heard from Mike Evans at the end of mandatory minicamp, so we'll touch on a few things there. But River, how we doing? We are officially out of mandatory minicamp. The hats still show mandatory minicamp with the sweat for both of us on there. But how we doing?
Doing pretty good. This fine Thursday afternoon. We're in kind of the depth of the last little frame of the off season, and then once training camp hits, we're back, baby. It's football again. So I know people are excited about that. I know I'm excited about that. So ready to get it going.
Yeah, no joke. I was just thinking we get this little break, although I'm looking over on social media. I'm looking at Baker Mayfield. He's been sharing some stuff. At least his trainer has been. He's been putting in a ton of work in the weight room. And then also Bucky Irving. Bucky Irving's actually working out with, I don't know if he's working out specifically with Baker, but it's around that same time frame during the day and definitely with the same trainer. Those two are getting after QB1. And
I don't know if Baker Mayfield wants anything to do with those Bucky Irving times that we hear about. It's coming to the the stadium or the at one buck at 4:30 a.m. That sort of thing. Probably wants to sleep in a little bit in the off season.
Yeah. We're not seeing a lot of the videos. I want to see the behind the scenes though, and maybe this is done. I think probably right after the season where guys will go off and do their thing, and Tristan Wirfs, and we'll see Gedeke, we'll see Baker go out on the boats, smash some beers, have a good time. I think that's right after the season is over. Now these guys are getting prepped, getting their bodies prepared. I mean, Todd Bowles sent a message to the team right after mandatory minicamp saying that don't just work out inside and you can do some little things here and there. You need to make sure that you're working outside because it, like he said, it's not going to get colder.
No, it will not. Trust us on that one. We'll be firsthand at training camp and we will report. The first thing we will report is that it is not getting colder. It is in fact going to be much hotter.
These hats will be dripping in our training camp. And
yours will be. I will have my bucket hat because I'm pragmatic. I'm practical and I'm stylish.
Now, we haven't had to make our adjustments, though, in the water. We've made sure now to bring massive jugs because
for sure.
And there's no complaints about this. I mean, we enjoy football. We love football, and we are very grateful for the opportunity for us to be there. But the fact, I mean, as many people that are listening now that are in Tampa or in the St. Pete area or just in Florida in general, this time of year, it is hot and it is going to be very hot expected this summer, but we're looking forward.
Indeed. And sources close to River Wells' way of thinking have revealed that he might be wearing a neck fan at training camp this year. He might be bringing it out. So
every year there's an upgrade, and this would be phenomenal if
now that's unconfirmed rumors and reports, but we'll see what happens once training camp hits. But there's been some chatter. There's been some chatter about that in River Wells' camp. So
my mom would be so happy to hear that. All the moms listening.
Absolutely. And you know what? They're practical. Okay.
Yep. They're smart.
Stylish.
And we don't want to faint.
Absolutely.
We don't want to faint.
No,
so, but before we get started, if you're here on YouTube with us, we would love to see your comments. If you have any questions or topics for us to discuss, we have a time allotted for that to discuss throughout the show. So make sure you drop in some comments. Also, too, if you're here, either watching live or afterward, smash that like button down below. We've been really appreciative of the engagement that you've been giving us, the comments, the advice, the criticism, just because I know we've been working on our audio situations on our instant reactions after practices. We're going to work on trying to improve those things, but getting those comments help us. We're listening, we're watching, we're responding, but smashing that like button definitely helps a lot to get out there to more Bucs fans as we're trying to do a whole ton of content coming to you guys on YouTube this upcoming season. Let's get started, River. Let's start off with what we're here for, and it's on the thumbnail. It's in the title. It's Bill Belichick and the Bucs and the speculation there. I want to go back to last year, and this probably was going on during the season more than anything, I'd say, River, where there was some chatter, some things being talked about of, hey, Bill Belichick, he's interested, of course, in coming back into the league, but which team would that be? And across some of the national outlets, some talking heads, Mike Florio being one of them, it was brought up that, Bill Belichick and the Bucs, there might be some kind of relationship there that could end up being, something that could solidify a head coaching job if Todd Bowles things don't go well in that 2024 season, as they were in that little slump area. So then there's always a chatter, I feel like, about replacing Bowles. Once, the Bucs go on a losing streak, it's instant. Bowles shouldn't be here. He shouldn't be the head coach. He should go to defensive coordinator. There was chatter too, River, about Liam Cohen as well. That's a pretty big discussion. But what were your thoughts about that? And I'll start last year whenever this was being rumored and talked about.
Well, on Bowles specifically, I will start. And it's really because you have these instances where the Bucs will start out hot. They'll have this lull midseason, and then they got to climb their way back out of it. And the last 3 years, 2022, 2023, 2024, they have. And they've won the division, and they've made the playoffs. And they even won a playoff game in 2023, remember. But the defense has sometimes been a little bit lackluster, and the Bucs have always had to kind of bring themselves out of this hole instead of, Todd Bowles himself. They need this killer instinct to put these teams away. And fans, you get some ire drawn from that, and football's a fickle business. And when you're winning, it's great. When you're losing, it's not. And so last 2 years, you had the Bucs at 4-7 in 2023 at one point, and then 4-6 in 2024 at one point. And they ended up making the playoffs and winning their division out of both of those records midseason. So the Bucs want to avoid that sort of thing. And to do that, Todd Bowles has to avoid that sort of thing. And I think there are plenty of fair criticisms about Todd Bowles' coaching style, his defense, and how he keeps finding himself in these holes. But at the same time, they win the NFC South. They do have a winning record. They do make the playoffs, which, prior to the Tom Brady era in Tampa Bay, that was unfathomable for a decade, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So they have this success here. They just want to take it to the next level. And the question with Bowles will always be, well, if you keep hitting this wall, when do you want to stop hitting this wall? And I think with Liam Cohen, there was always an opportunity. If something happens to Todd Bowles, or if he retires or whatnot, this would be a good guy to kind of bring into the next ring here as another coach. And I think the Bucs maybe even thought that when they gave him that big contract, or they offered him that big contract, I should say. And now he's at the Jacksonville Jaguars, so he already is a head coach. And with Bowles' success, it would be tough to move on from him. I think, even if, and I wrote an article on this whole thing we're about to talk about here. It's up on BucsGameday.com. But even if they were to win 6 games, or they were to win 7, I still think it would be pretty tough for them to move on, just because of that proven success and the fact that the players love Todd Bowles. Right, they really do. They wore T-shirts on his birthday with his face on it, and he's apparently a great players coach, and he loves to mess around with them, and they love to give it back to him. He just has such a hold in the locker room in Tampa Bay that I think it'd be tough to move on from him if he doesn't do well. But so far, all he's done is win the division. So you eventually have to wonder: do you want to do more than that every year? And Todd Bowles has to prove that he can do more than that every year. But I don't foresee a situation where they move on from that easy.
Now, for Bill Belichick, let's talk about it too. He's over here in North Carolina as well, and he's got a whole drama filled, which I never thought in my lifetime to be seeing the craziness that's been surrounding Bill Belichick. And I never thought this would be the way where, okay, if you're going to be hiring Bill Belichick 2 years ago, you're just looking at the football side of things, and that's what Bill Belichick's going to be bringing with you. Now he's got some baggage. He's got
Right.
some serious baggage with him. But I want to bring up here from Pardon My Take, a big time sports podcast here where Mike Florio, NBC Sports Mike Florio, was a guest on and brought this up again, bringing back the rumor that was pushed last year from Michael Lombardi, practically Belichick's unofficial mouthpiece, claiming that Bowles might retire, and which Bowles, like you were mentioning, was shutting all that kind of stuff down.
Yeah.
But on the show, he said Lombardi wouldn't shut up about this until the Jordan Hudson stuff, his new girlfriend stuff happens, and now you can't find him anywhere. But he was putting this idea out there that Todd Bowles would retire possibly after the 2024 season. So I feel like Belichick has been eyeballing the Bucs. Maybe Lombardi was trying to speak it into existence. They'd be a vacancy there because that's one of the teams where they've got the talent Belichick needs. Thoughts on this right here? Because, I mean, we've seen where, Belichick and what he was able to do with the New England Patriots. You see Tom Brady leave. He actually comes down to Tampa Bay, and you saw the immediate success that Brady had with the Bucs, but also too, it feels like it's built a culture. We've also heard from a guy like Hassan Reddick, who just arrived in Tampa and mentioned that he wasn't really in the know of much of the Buccaneers until Tom Brady came down and won his Super Bowl. And then he also mentioned too, it feels like the culture shifted as well in Tampa Bay. And that's coming from a guy that played up north for a lot of teams. And then also too is just new to the area and also wasn't keeping an eye on the Bucs, but he felt like Tom Brady, yes, brought the Super Bowl, put them on the map, it felt like, but also to help change that culture to what it is now today. And it's still under Todd Bowles' helm, River.
Well, I think people seem to miss Bill Belichick in the NFL. Is what is always rings to me because people forget he hasn't coached it down for UNC yet. He signed the contract, 5 years, 3 years guaranteed, and he hasn't coached any games for them yet. And I think a lot of people are like, man, what if he came back? What team would he? And maybe there is a future in where he comes back to the NFL, but for right now, he's spent half an off season in Chapel Hill. And yes, he does have some stuff going on with him and Jordan Hudson, which is just like his fault, his Spurs or whatever. But I think he's going to at least play this year out. And I kind of put forth the possibility in my article I read about this. What if he's happy at UNC? What if he likes coaching at the college level? And I think that's definitely a possibility. I think he wouldn't take the job if he didn't think that might be the case. So I just see him staying there, and I don't see him kind of moving over to the NFL so quickly. And the other thing, you talked about it, you mentioned it. Tom Brady went from the New England Patriots to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, right? Mm-hmm. If you were Bill Belichick, would you want to tie your sort of legacy to that exact same move? That feels a little weird, doesn't it?
Yeah, it feels odd.
So I mean, Bill Belichick's one of the greatest coaches of all time. And of course, you have the opportunity to talk to him, at least Atlanta did last year. Remember, Atlanta had interviews with him. He talked to some teams because obviously if you have the opportunity to try and hire him, you talk to him, but he's going to want a lot of control. He's going to want to pick all of his personnel. Quite frankly, I don't think he's a very good general manager, and he's been a general manager in New England the entire time he was there. Now he's handing off recruiting in UNC, so that might be the best thing for him is to just focus on the coaching aspect of it, right? Mm-hmm. But I mentioned this in the article, those two things have to happen. Todd Bowles has to either get fired or retire, and then Bill Belichick has to want to come to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Those are two pretty big ifs, I think. So I would say probably not. But if he wants to come back to the NFL at some point, so be it. But I think he's still got to coach at Carolina, guys. He's still got to do that, and we'll see how that goes given the recent hoopla around his tenure. But I think that's what he's focused on. I think Todd Bowles is focused on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I think that's the way it's going to stay.
There's a good comment here from Spectre Wolf. Appreciate you hanging out with us in the comments, saying, Bill and Jason Light, Buccaneers' current GM, would bump heads a lot, and maybe potentially. I mean,
Light
I don't know if that
knows
would be
Bill.
a good natural fit one another. And I don't know, and it's not just saying that Jason Light couldn't be able to work on that. Like we were just saying, it's not a lot of teams though across the league that would be able to, the way
That's
that he's going to run the system. Bill Belichick
Jason
is
Light came
different.
from the Patriots under Bill Belichick, right? They have a relationship with each other. They have a working relationship with each other. They've known each other for a long time. It's everybody, right? It's Bill Belichick wants to come in and be like, "Oh, I want to be your personnel guy. I want to be your general manager." And that if Jason Light's the personnel guy and general manager, then that's a problem. And like you said, that goes for anybody in the league. It goes for the Falcons. No, it goes with whoever else we talk to. You need to give up a lot for him to be satisfied there, and teams weren't willing to do that last year when he was available to coach in the National Football League. So why would they do it again? Yeah.
Yep. No, I just should have finished it off too. I think all of us, at least you and I, Caleb as well, probably agree on this show that Todd Bowles has really, not, I wouldn't say have to win over the locker room, but like you were mentioning earlier, they have a lot of respect for him. They like him. I know from the outside perspective, I can fully understand that. I was wondering the same thing when we first got into covering the Bucs, and it was really early on, and I was only there started in 2021, and then saw the transition going over to Todd Bowles, and he's a guy that isn't going to give you a whole ton of lengthy answers. It has improved, I will say that, but when you are behind the scenes, you get to see the practices, and you see also too the videos after games and how much these guys are enjoying being around him. And also too, you hear the comments from players like Antoine Winfield, Levante David, Mike Evans, like your vets that have been there, who have found success, who have won Super Bowls, and they feel like they have the right guy at the helm. I think that says a lot. It doesn't really matter what we say. It's what happens inside of that locker room and inside to that entire one Buck building at the end of the day. So let's jump over. Speaking of Mike Evans here, let's transition over to what he had to say. He picked his top wide receivers, River, and I'm interested to see what if you're in the same agreement here. He picked his top younger wide receivers in the league today. Also, too, Mike Evans is on the verge of NFL history this fall. Mike Evans could break Jerry Rice's all-time record for the most consecutive 1,000-yard receiving seasons. He's currently tied at 11 with the GOAT there at the wide receiver room. He's hit 1,000 yards every single year of his career, totaling 11,633 yards, the most in the NFL over the past decade. It's the GOAT to wide receivers right now. Let's
getting it done.
I was going to say, 31 years old, heading into his 12th season in the league. He's adding to his NFL Hall of Fame resume, and I think it's just really cool to see that he's stuck with the Bucs. And, I think moving forward, which we'll talk about at the end of this segment, talk about the future of Mike Evans, because he's, at his last year going into his contract. So interested to see where things head there. But he did pick his top wide receivers, and let's go ahead and go through these. Top picks. Let's start off with Jamar Chase. I think that's an excellent one there out of the Cincinnati Bengals. He said, if you said he was better than me, I don't think anybody's better than me. But if you said him, I would understand. Is the quote that Mike Evans gave Greg Allman of Fox Sports.
Gotta love a confident wide receiver, folks. You do.
And I'll get, with Jamar Chase too, you got to have a good quarterback that can throw the ball. And Joe Burrow is one of the best in the game right now, currently.
Top 5.
100%. He also mentioned Justin Jefferson, Minnesota Vikings, absolute stud there. Nico Collins from the Houston Texans. He also mentioned a NFC South rival wide receiver, which we put an article out on BucsGameday.com about, and he named Drake London as one of his top in the game right now. He said he's kind of a mix like me and Julio Jones. He has the length like me. What are your thoughts on that and that comparison between Mike Evans and Drake London from the Atlanta Falcons, River?
Well, they both play a similar type of game, right? I think Mike's got a more developed route tree, and I think it's kind of underrated in that respect, actually. People talk about Mike Evans as the 1,000-yard receiving guy, and I think he's a lot more than a 1,000-yard receiving guy. Prolific touchdown scorer. He can run just about any route. You look at actually PFF tracked the best wide receiver for each route type last year. They in a recent article they did, and Evans was number 1 on the slant. So channeling his inner Michael Thomas there. But it just goes to show that he can run a lot of different routes, right? And Drake London is a really good, jump ball, 50-50 contested catch guy. There's a lot of questions in college as to whether or not he could separate at the NFL level because he had trouble with that at USC, and boy, can he. He really can. He still has a pretty developed route tree himself, and he's a really good target for the Falcons over there. So it makes sense. There's similar size, similar archetype. They can do a lot of similar things. So it makes sense that Mike and him would, have an understanding and talk to each other and be friends with each other because, they're very similar. Yeah. So I'm sure Bucs fans don't like to hear any of that because in the 6 games that Drake London has played the Bucs in about 3 of them, he's absolutely torched the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Gone up for over 100 yards, found the end zone. So unfortunately, they get a bit of a good look at him, and they're going to get another look at him, actually. Week 1, big game.
In
NFC
hot
South
Atlanta,
game,
baby.
In hot Atlanta, deep in the A. They're going to be doing it. So we're going to see how it goes. But he's a good wide receiver. Definitely one of the more underrated, I think, wide receivers in the league. And I used to not be a big Drake London guy myself, but I think the more you watch him and the more you watch his tape and what he can do, I think it really shows how good of a wide receiver he is.
Yeah, he's a guy that likes to be physical too. Definitely when you're in the red zone, he's got good hands and he'll do everything in his power to get 2 feet on the ground. And he's a very talented guy and well respected. There's a comment here. Drake London is so good. I feel bad that he doesn't have a QB, but in a way it's good because he's a rival anyways. LOL.
Well,
hopefully
we'll see how that
Penix,
goes. Yeah.
Hopefully Penix for you.
We'll see how that goes. Penix could take that next step up, or he couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Those are in fact the 2 options.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
We'll just going back to watching the college days of Michael Penix. So that kid has an arm, and if things can click for him, then there are going to be some battles for Todd Bowles' defense there in the future. But yeah, week 1, man, up there in Atlanta. Hopefully we're going to be up there as well for that season opener.
I'll be up there. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Let's keep going down the list here. He also mentioned Brian Thomas Jr. And then, actually, real quick, I do want to mention, too, I forgot a little bit of the quote here from Mike Evans saying, talking about Drake London, he said, I've known Drake since high school. He can hoop and play football. I've always been a fan of his game. So definitely a big fan there of the NFC South rival wide receiver. But he also mentioned Brian Thomas Jr. from the Jacksonville Jaguars, who I thought had a phenomenal season for the situation that he was in last year. For the Jags, I think the future is very bright. Imagine now you have Brian Thomas Jr., and then you've also got Travis Hunter on the other side. That is
who should be playing cornerback more than wide out, but that's a discussion for another pod.
That's for the Jags. That's for Jags game day, maybe one day.
Yeah, maybe one day.
But. Yeah, but the Liam Cohen really interested to see what they do there with those 2 studs and to a good running back as well. But also mentioned Malik Neighbors from the New York Giants. And then A.J. Brown, and he said, if you still count him young. But overall, he said, I think I like them all. The game is a passing league now, even more overall. You like those picks? Is he missing anybody? Any young wide receivers that could be?
Well, I didn't hear Amon-Ra St. Brown's name. Did I? Am I mistaken? Because quite frankly, I would take him over a lot of guys on that list. Now, plays a very different game than Mike Evans does. Really great in space, a lot of really good route running skills, really good with yak yards. But I do think that if I were to talk about the best wide receivers in the league, I would definitely mention him. Mm-hmm. And, is CeeDee Lamb a young guy? Because if that's the case, that's another one.
If A.J. Brown's here on the list, then I think you can count in CD.
Well, then in that case, CD for sure. Another very similar grade. That's, again, Mike's going to favor guys at his body type that can play a game like him, which guys like Jamar Chase can for sure. Guys like Nico Collins can for sure. But I think the excellent route running yak guy getting, working in space like Chris Godwin for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, at the height of his power. I think that archetype fits best into the modern NFL offense that you see these guys like Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, Kyle Furr, Mike Daniel kind of innovating. So, but to address an earlier comment from Spectre Wolf, I do think Justin Jefferson is probably the best wide receiver in football. And I think it's probably going to continue for as long as he wants to continue because he can do literally anything. He can be that possession catch guy. He can be that jump ball guy. He can do all of that. So a shout out to Mike Evans for mentioning that. I would probably take Jefferson over Chase. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but they're both very good and very similarly talented. But my number one's Jay Jettis.
I think for my selection, it all depends on how J.J. McCarthy can get the ball to him.
Sure does.
And his technically rookie season, as I'm going to label it as. That's like at the end of the day, man, like Jamar
the
Chase
NBA
is
style
so
of rookie
spoiled.
seasons.
Yeah. I mean, like I said earlier, Joe Burrow, the way that he can get the ball to Jamar Chase. I mean, those two guys just click. As you can see over here, I'm a Steelers fan through the heart and everything, and I have to deal with them twice a year, and I'm always scared for my life because even though we usually do have a good defense year to year, still nonetheless you're facing Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and they can still tear you to shreds.
There was an argument that Joe
Burrow.
There was an argument that Joe Burrow was the best quarterback in football last year. So
yeah, no, I would. I mean, he's top three to me.
He certainly made it happen.
Yeah, top three minimum, and I think any team, a lot of teams, I shouldn't say any team, but there's very, very select few that would do anything in their power to get Joe Burrow on their team. But yeah, I thought those were some pretty good picks there from Mike Evans. He also mentioned as well Emeka Egbuka. We haven't seen a snap of him yet in the NFL.
We haven't. No.
Football. Not even preseason
but
football.
He has the best look at Emeka Egbuka, doesn't he? So, if he's singing his praises, might be good news for Bucs fans for sure.
I want to have a quick one before we go over to the Rondé Barber. He picked his top 3 rookies, so we'll finish off the show on that. But I have a really good question here, and I'm not going to just praise myself on it. But let's have a conversation here, River. So last year we were here and we were there for it with Jalen McMillan. Everything was looking good for Jalen McMillan. He was making these plays. The chemistry with him and Baker Mayfield seemed to be right off the bat. Very impressive, consistent with his hands, yada, yada, yada. And now we're having a very similar conversation about Emeka Egbuka. Can you find any kind of differences or what might stand out differently with Emeka than what Jalen brought in this early parts in his, before he reached, the first game of his rookie season? Because that's the one thing that I'm also kind of trying to process in my brain. And I think it's really going to depend on how he's utilized in this offense under a new offensive coordinator and Josh Grizzard. And that's really how I'm trying to process and trying to figure it out. So interested to get your take on that.
Well, it's also important to remember that Jalen McMillan was a 3rd-round pick in 2024. And he ended up towards the back half of the year. It took him a while to get going. Towards the back half of the year, he ended up playing really, really good football, right? He actually ended up last year with 8 receiving touchdowns, despite only coming into form towards that back half. Emeka Egbuka was a 1st-round pick. And the reason why he's a 1st-round pick is because of just how polished he is from the jump, right? He comes into the league as a guy who is super pro-ready in many respects. He's got the mental fortitude. He's got the attitude. He's got the work ethic. And he's just very, very smooth in his route running. He's smart. And all those things make him a very worthy 1st-round pick that Baker Mayfield told us you can just plug right into that offense. And I don't know, Jalen McMillan was a guy that could plug right into that offense, even though he caught a touchdown his first NFL game. They play a little bit of a different style. I think Egbuka is at his base. The best way to use him is that he's a really good slot guy in his face. Like Chris Godwin, you can bring him outside. McMillan, he played a little bit outside in 2024 because you had Chris Godwin there until, of course, the injury happened. So they're a little bit different, but really, I think the biggest benefit with Egbuka is that he can just come to Tampa Bay, get in here, and he can produce. And that's what the expectation is. And I don't know if they had quite that high of an expectation with Jalen McMillan because he was a 3rd-round pick. And I honestly think that if you drafted Egbuka to play, especially with Chris Godwin's injuries in doubt, I think he's wide receiver 3 over Jalen McMillan, which sucks for Jalen McMillan. And there's a decent argument that Bucs fans can make that it was kind of unfortunate that had to happen to him after the great season he had last year. But I think that's what's going to happen, right? So I think he's going to get more playing time off the bat. I think he comes into the NFL as a more polished wide receiver. And I'm excited to see what he can do because he's already been looking good and doing some stuff at camp and getting some chemistry with Baker Mayfield. And we'll see how everything fits in. But I would expect Egbuka to be wide receiver 3 over McMillan. And we'll see if Chris Godwin comes back immediately in week 1. That's the expectation in the Bucs front office. That's what they think is going to happen. That's how they're preparing for the season. But if that doesn't happen, and you can have Egbuka go right into that slot, and then McMillan on the outside, and then you can get them both in the field.
And the Bucs didn't even just draft one wide receiver. They went in and grabbed another one with Tez Johnson. There's a question here, and I've been seeing from YouTube saying I've been seeing more good things about Tez and Egbuka. Is that because Egbuka is a first-round pick and expected more, and Tez is a seventh-rounder and pressing, so he's talked about more, or is Tez looking better than Egbuka? And just straight off the bat, I'll go ahead and tell you it's definitely higher expectations coming to Egbuka.
For sure.
Because like what River was just explaining, a first round pick. Now you're probably hearing more big plays being made, maybe just because Tez Johnson and what Josh Grizzard, what we're seeing some signs of is that Grizzard's going to take some shots, which I'm very excited for. It's really just going to depend
on a little bit more
Mayfield.
vertical.
Yeah, but it's going to depend on if Baker Mayfield can get that ball down there. And that's something that your backup quarterback, Kyle Trask, that's something that he's talented in, but he's also not the greatest at your intermediate. But Baker is someone where he is good at those intermediate. He can still take those shots when need be, but he's got to get better. If I was going to say one of their big improvements they need from Baker is not only trying to take those big hits, which he is going to take no matter what, but taking those big shots and connecting would be something that Tez Johnson would excel at, and we're seeing that in camp so far. So you're probably just hearing more of Tez Johnson chatter because of that. What's your take on that one, though? River. And I will mention too, Todd Bowles said this guy is just not a special teams guy, returner, punt return, yada, yada, yada. He is a wide receiver. So that also jumps you into the conversation of wide receivers, which we are going to have a big conversation going into training camp about, because there is some big competitions coming our way in late July, River.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it. You hit the nail on the head with that last part you said. And shout out to Sean Aguilar watching on YouTube here. He says the Bucs are the best wide receiver room in the NFL. If it's not them, it's probably the Eagles, and then it's like 1 and 2, and it's interchangeable, right? So I think that's definitely a very valid take. It's so full of talent, and I think they're living in two different worlds, right? I think Emeka Egbuka is supposed to come in here. He's going to play. He's going to get reps. And he's going to catch footballs. Tez Johnson, I think people are wondering if he can play receiver in this offense instead of just being a punt returner, because he's behind Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Emeka Egbuka, and Jalen McMillan. So I think the buzz around him is not necessarily about, how good he is the player. It's will he be able to catch footballs and play wide receiver in this offense instead of just being regulated to a punt returner. And I think the general consensus is that Todd Bowles has been really impressed with him. Josh Grizzard's been really impressed with him. He's been playing his way into that conversation. But even if he has, what do you do with him, right? When do you put him on the field? Who are you going to put in? Who are you going to lose instead of him, right? So that's the whole thing, really.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun, man. I'm itching for training camp. I'm enjoying this last little break that we have as a writing team and covering the team. But I can't lie, I think all of us, at least me, feel very optimistic about this team and what it can bring. Definitely if Josh Grizzard just what Liam Cohen was able to do last year and keep that same stride and add his own little tidbits of things that he would like to see improve, or like we were mentioning, take those shots more often, and seeing Bucky Irving going into the second season. Their offensive line is back. Baker Mayfield, who is going to be highly competitive. And then what you've got in Cade Otton, some of these other tight ends as well. You got a two-headed monster in your running back room now with also two Rashad White. You also have Sean Tucker. Like, offense,
that's gonna be another big problem we're gonna have to figure out. Yeah,
very, very excited about it. And you've got some question marks on the defensive side of the ball, but that was expected. But man, I'm amped for this training camp. But let's jump over to finish off this show. Hall of Fame, Bucs Hall of Fame legend, I should say, Rondé Barber.
NFL legend, Rondé Barber.
Yeah, literally NFL football legend. I mean, one of the best to ever do it. But he most recently gave out his top 3 rookies. Funny you say that, because Nathan Elliott just put in the comments saying, met the Buccaneers rookies on Monday. Great kids. And we can attest to that as well, being there in person with those guys. Really fun. And also talked with one of the PR members of the Bucs and said they think this is one of the best classes, at least personality wise, the way they represent themselves, definitely in the way that they're going to be working in the locker room as teammates and everything. They feel like this is one of the best groups that Jason Light and company have put together. So, but we're not going to pick, but over here, Rondé Barber, and we should all listen to Rondé Barber because he is the one that knows more than we do on the football side of things. But he picked his top 3. Let's start off with number 3, River. Like I said, number 1 is going to surprise you a little bit, but number 3 is Benjamin Morrison, former Notre Dame cornerback there, a guy that is expected to try to compete for starting cornerback position.
Yeah.
And there's been chatter about Jamel Dean and him, competing for a job. Zion McCullum practically locking down his position, but also got to see him participate in a little bit of OTAs, but then in the first day mandatory minicamp, seeing like he was 100%. Then he sat out the last 2 days. That's something we can talk about when we get closer to training camp. What about your pick here at number 3 with Benjamin Morrison? Too low or too high?
It's interesting because when it comes to rookies that are going to contribute, I mean, the initial onset is that someone like Emeka Egbuka would contribute more, which I believe is his number 4, his outside guy, right? Mm-hmm. But Morrison could end up contributing, especially because Jamel Dean has never played a full season in the NFL. Yeah. And if that trend continues, then Benjamin Morrison is going to contribute because he will at one point be in the game. There's also some wonder and talk among Bucs fans, can he win the job outright from Dean? And Dean's a pretty good cornerback, guys, so it would be tough. But Morrison's a ball hawk, which Dean has not been able to do. He's not been able to get interceptions. And he's younger. He's coming off from an injury, so you kind of went from one injury guy to another who's kind of battling with that, but it was a more of a condition surgery than an actual injury. So there's a possibility that he could see the field sooner than later in that respect. But they think he's very versatile. He can play man zone. He gets his hands on the football, and he's already been working, at OTAs, and he was there the first day of mandatory minicamp. They're resting a little bit until training camp. He's got some time, but he's looking to step in and contribute right away. So it makes sense, I think.
So there is Benjamin Morrison, and he went to number 2, and it's funny. We're staying on the defensive side of the ball, coming from a guy that did the best on the defensive side of the ball. I love it. But number 2 here is staying in the defensive backfield. And this one is Jacob Parrish, who we talked about a lot since his arrival to Tampa Bay, but expected to play that nickel position, which was Barber's old position as well. But he's got him at
not only that, Logan, he revolutionized the nickel corner.
He was the pioneer.
He was.
You could say, but it seems like, we don't see Rondé Barber out there, at least when we're out there at those practices. But I would imagine he gets some good access on some visits to some practices. So he's probably at least not only been at some, but also heard some things about Jacob Parrish, because in our own eyes, though, seeing him at practices, this kid is a baller. He likes to get to the ball, and he gets there quick, has great hips. And we're going to see him play this upcoming season. But he's got him at number 2. Thoughts on that here?
Too low. I think he should be number 1.
Wow.
Okay. I do. Parrish is probably going to get the most raw playing time, on the defense, because he's going to play at nickel. Now, nickel corners, for those of you who, aren't as up to date on like NFL scheme or just learning, they don't play on the field all the time. They're the 5th defensive back on the field, and they're usually used in passing downs, certain situations. But in the modern NFL, it's usually like 65 to 75% of the time, right? They're becoming more and more prominent. If anyone saw the Super Bowl last year, when it came to the Eagles and the Chiefs, Cooper DeJean played nickel very well for the Philadelphia Eagles. So that position is starting to become more important. And Jacob Parrish is going to take that over from Tyke Smith, who's going to move back to safety. So Parrish is going to be on the field a lot. He's super athletic. If he was a few inches taller, he'd be a first-round pick probably, just based on his measurables alone, right? Freak athlete everywhere except for height. Plays really tough, plays aggressively in college, and he's made some good plays already for the Bucs. So in camp, as Todd Bowles says, shorts and shirts. But I do think that he has the potential of the most impact as a rookie on this entire team, because they need more defensive backs. They need people who can get their hands on the football. Parrish is super athletic. He'll be on the field, most of the time on defense, and he's going to start, right? Benjamin Morrison might be behind Jamel Dean, behind Zion McCollum. Jacob Parrish is going to be starting. So I do think, if you were to ask me, he has the potential to have the most impact as a rookie.
Mm-hmm. And then going to number 1 here, River, It's not Emeka Egbuka. We're staying on the defensive side of the ball, and this one is going to be edge rusher David Walker, who was a 5th-round pick from Central Arkansas. Here's Barber on Walker saying, when you put the film on, you're like, holy cow, this dude has the mentality. It's kind of like his underdog mentality that makes people respect him. Here's some stat lines from Walker here. At the FCS level, he had 39 career sacks and 82.5 tackles for loss.
For the folks at home, that's crazy.
That's ridiculous.
That's almost like 20 and a half, tackles for loss a year in college. That's ludicrous.
Yeah. Yep. Barber did admit, though, Walker is undersized and played weaker competition, but his mindset and motor jumps off the tape. I go, and I'll mention here, because covering them right here, you can see the helmet, Florida State. Jared Verse came from Albany. Very, very, very small team, weak competition.
Yep.
Went to Florida State. I saw him in practice, just took me only 1 or 2 times. I said, okay, yeah, this guy is FBS level. Not only that, though, he is going to be one of the top defenders in college football, and
perhaps now the NFL. Yes.
Yeah, as we're seeing a lot of praise be given to Jared Verse and just the way that
fantastic.
He played.
Yeah.
He's absolute beast of nature. So I kind of relate this over here to David Walker of playing some weaker competition, blah, blah, blah. Barber also, too, explained the logic by referencing Tampa Bay's 2002 Super Bowl run, which took off after the Bucs added edge rusher Simeon Rice the year prior. He said, I'm not making this comparison, but David Walker looks like a guy that could do that. Your thoughts here on David Walker, someone who we haven't seen a whole ton of, which I believe, dealing with whatever it was there, hammy, something.
I believe it's a hammy. Yeah. I think it's a hamstring injury. Yeah.
So we haven't been able to see a whole ton of him yet. Hopefully, since it is a hammy, probably wanted to rest that fully. It takes a little bit of time.
Yeah, he'll be totally fine for training camp. That's not a problem.
So we're going to see it. We're going to get a good taste of what he looks like going into camp, which is going to be super fun. I'm so excited. I just can't wait for tackles. I just can't wait for tackles versus.
Get the pads on, get the hat on, and go hit them.
Let's go. But number 1 here, David Walker from Rondé Barber. Thoughts on this pick?
Yeah, it's a pretty aggressive number 1.
He's going for the traffic. He's going for the clicks, man. I got to respect him.
Yeah, not to, of course, just David Walker. I think with that production at the FCS level, there's definitely a lot of potential for him to be a really polished edge rusher. I was talking about this during the draft. Jason Light usually goes for those really raw prospects like Yaya Diaby, right? Who ended up, he's ended up being pretty good for the Buccaneers. And there's a little bit of a switch over with this draft. Now he's going for proven prospects at the college level instead, and a little bit of a different sort of strategy. And you land on David Walker. David Walker, to me, has the same problem that Benjamin Morrison has, is that who's he going to play over, right? To be a number 1 impactful rookie, you got to get your snaps and make your plays. And he's got Hassan Reddick and from free agency and Yaya Diaby, and those will be your 2 starting edge rushers. And then you're going to have a second line. And one of the people on that second line is probably going to be Anthony Nelson, who is a veteran who's been on the line. And then who's the other guy, right? Well, you've got David Walker, of course, who you drafted in, I believe, the 5th round. And then you've got Chris Braswell, who you drafted in the 2nd round last year, right? So do you want to just give up on Braswell and relegate him to a 3rd rotational guy? You want to have Walker in there? So he's behind a lot of guys, sort of in the depth chart and in the rotation. And that's going to make it tough for him to really contribute in this first year. Now, he's going to learn from guys like Hassan Reddick. He's going to learn from Yaya Diaby. He's going to work with Chris Braswell and never to get better. He's going to learn from Anthony Nelson, who's a veteran, who's probably a lot of really good thing to teach him, just, regardless of how good of a player he is. He's been in the league for so long. So he's going to get a lot of valuable experience and knowledge from this first year. And I think the Bucs hope that that's going to translate into something big, going forward. But Marquise Watts is also still here. Jose Ramirez is still here, and the Bucs love those 2 guys. So it's going to be tough for him to really, in year 1, crack that sort of initial rotation, and that's why I kind of think it's surprising that you would pick a guy like that, because I think he could end up being a beast. But how long? How much is he going to play this year? And I think that's the main question.
It's going to come down to as well with Chris Braswell if he's going to be able to take a bigger leap.
That's going to be an underrated player Bucs fans should be looking for because do you want to give up on a second-round pick this early, or do you want to see if he makes that big step?
Yeah, exactly. So that's going to be something we are going to monitor right away. Won't matter until the fourth day of training camp when we get the shells on. We're going to have some pads popping, and we're going to see if Chris Braswell is getting it back there. Whoever it's going to be, that's going to be one we're going to be having on the notepad, of course, of seeing who's bringing the most pressures and getting those tackles for loss and sacks. There's a comment here from Spectre Wolf saying, I know Barton said he's ready for the pads. He really can't wait to hit these D linemen. I think that was Luke Gedeke who told us that actually, but I'm sure Barton is in that same boat. These guys are ready for the pads to come on because for the most part, we don't get to talk about the trenches a whole ton until those pads come on and when we get to camp. So whenever we go through these rookie mini camp, we go through as well OTAs and we go into mandatory mini camp. You can't really talk about the guys in the trenches until we get those things put on them. But we're getting closer and closer. We're only now getting close to a month away from training camp beginning. And we're going to have all kinds of coverage for you guys all throughout that. But I think that's going to do it for this week's show. We appreciate everybody tuning in. If you're still here with us or watching afterward, smack the like button down below. We appreciate it a ton and all the engagement you guys have been giving us this offseason. We hope to give you more on our side of content and entertainment as we head into what should be a really fun season for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Let's do it.
But that's going to do it for me and River on Here the Cannons. We will talk to you guys next week. And everybody, enjoy the rest of y'all's week and weekend.
Fire the cannons.